found near the ground, my soul, myself, beneath this trail. There's no...
Good morning, friends. It is April, and there's a phenomenon that we're starting to see in the hiker community where hikers generally start sometime during the month of March, and then in April we often see a lot of them leaving the trail. So it's that season now, and as I'm watching people leave the trail, I've started wondering and thinking, and I've come to the conclusion that, in my belief, one of the reasons we see such a big group leaving is the commonly held belief that a thru hike is just an extended backpacking trip. So let's chat about that. You'll oftentimes, in the beginning of a hiker season, you'll hear a lot of aspiring thru hikers say, oh, I go backpacking and I do backpacking trips all the time. And this is, a thru hike is just an extended backpacking trip. And while I guess there's some truth to that, I don't believe that statement is accurate. And there's two reasons for that. One is sustainability, and two is lifestyle. So, and I know there's going to be some people that disagree with me that. Cool. These are just my beliefs and observations from having witnessed this phenomena over the past few years. So, sustainability first. Backpacking, going out for a weekend, a long weekend a week, doing 15 miles a day, awesome. But there's a difference between hiking 15 miles a day for a week and hiking 15 miles a day for 2 weeks, for a month, for 2 months, 3 months, kind of sometimes with no end in sight. There's a difference between backpacking and long distance hiking in that sometimes the gear you can get away with carrying on a backpack trip, you can't necessarily sustain carrying that gear for 2,000 miles. You can go through a weather system or adverse weather on a backpacking trip, but sustaining the fortitude to go through adverse weather for months at a time, especially when you know there's no way out of it, that's a completely different level. I remember once in the Sierras, I was sitting with a bunch of hikers and we were commiserating, and as one hiker left, another hiker yelled out, "Hey, if you find a way out of here, let me know." And that's the thing. Like, thru hikers don't necessarily have another trailhead they can be picked up at in 20 miles if things go wrong. A lot of times there is no way out. So sustainability is one thing that makes a thru hike different from a backpacking trip. Lifestyle, I akin it to saying, like, if you were to go away for some reason and leave your life for 6 months, this would be akin to calling it an extended vacation. You can go on vacation for a weekend or a week, but because you're gone for 6 months doesn't necessarily make it an extended vacation. Through hiking, you're changing your life. Like, you're not going back in a week. You're not getting your comfy bed and your shower and your family and your job and your connections back home in a week. You're gone long enough that you have left one world and fully submerged yourself in another. And that's mentally, emotionally, that's hard. It's really hard. So yeah, for those two reasons, I would discourage people from thinking along the lines of a thru hike is just an extended backpacking trip. That's a good jumping off start, but there's so much more that goes into it. And we're to the point now, most hikers are 2 weeks to a month into their hike, where they're starting to see that fine line between what distinguishes a backpacking trip from a thru hike. And I think because they went in to their thru hike with that mentality, at this point it starts to shake them up a bit, mentally and emotionally, as they come to terms with, it's not an extended backpack trip. So I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I do believe that as long as you're healthy and in a good spot, anyone can thru hike. But with that being said, I will say also that not everybody will want to thru hike. And that's cool. That's cool. You need to do you and whatever brings you passion and enjoyment and peace. For some, that's a backpacking trip. For some, that's a thru hike. Okay, number 2 in reasons why I believe people leave trail in the first 200 miles. The next thing is overdoing it, pushing too hard, and I'll throw injury into this one too. It's also really common to see hikers start out pushing really hard. There's a place to stop and rest and get a meal 20 miles from the border, and then 20 miles after that there's another place. So a lot of hikers will start out and they'll do 20 miles the first day, get to the resupply town, do 20 miles the second day, get to a resupply town, and try to sustain that. Even if they don't do the 20 miles, a lot of hikers start out pushing the first day like they want to hike on day 30. The thing about that, and those in the thru hiking community will tell you time and time again, the first week isn't comparable to the rest of your hike. You can't hike the first week like you plan on hiking after your first week, because that pretty much just sets you up for having a harder time. More and more people fall out in those first 40 miles for injury, for dehydration, heat stroke, hypothermia if there's still snow and they started too early. That first 40-mile section is a big section for fallouts on the trail. And I think one of the reasons is people push. They're so excited. They've been planning this for a year, maybe longer, and they push really hard from the get-go, without allowing their body and their mind and their soul to catch up to them. And at some point, you're going to reach the breaking point where your body, mind, and soul are going to demand that you stop. And there's no pushing through that. So pushing too hard from the get-go, definitely a reason a lot of people fall out. Falling on that, injury. A lot of people, a lot of hikers fall suspect to injury in the first 100 miles. And again, because of that same excitement, adrenaline rush, whatever, they want to push through. They want to push through on blisters. Oh, dude, at Warner Springs in 2018, I came in, a lady had a blister literally taking over her entire foot. Like, this thing was massive. And she was planning to hike out the next day. And the rest of us hikers are looking at her like, you're insane. Like, it's not worth it. But it's a common mentality among thru hikers to override their body in this manner and try to push through on an injury. When time is of the essence, because you only have a certain window in which to complete a thru hike, every lost day counts. And wasting, well, quote unquote, spending that precious time trying to heal an injury is hard. Emotionally and mentally, it's taxing to sit still and give your injury the time that it needs when you really know you should be hiking. It's a battle, folks. It's a thing. So I don't think enough hikers stop to give their body the time that it needs. And in another 100 miles, they're off trail. So yeah, reason number 2, pushing too hard and pushing too hard through an injury. Okay, that brings us to reason number 3. And that is overplanning, underplanning, and overthinking. I will say, in my experiences, I have seen more people, well, no, maybe that's not even true. I was going to say, I think I've seen more people leave because of overplanning than underplanning, but now that I think about it, I don't know that I would actually say that either. Anyhow, so when you're planning for the PCT, there's a tendency to soak in everything you can find. There's resupply strategies, there's spreadsheets, you need to hike this many miles a day. There's people that sit and make very elaborate spreadsheets about where they're going to stop, sometimes even down to where they're camping every night. Or you'll see a lot of pictures on Facebook of people going, yay, my resupply is done, and they've got 20 and they've got, sorry, I got a message from my daughter. They've got 20 UPS boxes full of food ready and labeled to ship to different towns. I think as humans, we have an innate desire to want to control. And that's normal. That's part of being this human species. But the thing about a thru hike that you soon realize is there's actually very little you can control. And if you come into a thru hike with your mind and heart set on making this many number of miles per day, or only using this resupply strategy, or whatever else the case may be, whatever else you may have planned on. Yeah, I've seen that take a lot of hikers down. So you're asking me, what is the perfect amount of planning? Well, heck if I know. I haven't figured that out yet. I guess my advice would be to make sure you have the basics of what you need to survive as far as your gear goes. Especially your big 3, your shelter, your pack, and your sleeping system. And then from that, kind of go with your gut, but be prepared to be adaptable. With that being said, I realize that I am in a fortunate situation where I do have a home base. I have a great ground support that is willing to be adaptable with me, and that allows me to be adaptable easily and to change with those things on trail that I can't control. Not all thru hikers have that. So I can only speak from my experience. So yeah, I don't know what the perfect amount of planning is. I think that's the golden question. I would say no matter if you're over planning or if you're under planning, be prepared to be adaptable. And if you've over planned, be prepared and be okay mentally with ditching some of those plans. Yeah, just be adaptable. I think that's what I've seen from other hikers and what I've learned from my own experience is the success factor in planning depends on your ability to be adaptable to those plans. Okay, this brings us to reason number 4. Life happens. Whether you planned to get off trail for some reason, a graduation, a wedding, whatever, or it's something back home that happened that was unplanned that requires you to leave trail and be there. A lot of people in the first 100 miles do leave because something back home is called them. If it's planned, like a lot of people go, oh, I'm going to go on trail, but my brother's getting married, so I'm going to leave trail for a week and a half, go to his wedding, and then I'll be back. I've seen it quite a few times where it's just really hard to make it back. Once you step foot back into your regular life and all that comes with that, the routine, the bills, the responsibilities, it's really hard to break free again and to make it back to trail in the first part. And then if you do make it back to trail, you got to go through that whole reintegration thing all over again. You know, your body and your mind and your soul getting used to the thru hiker lifestyle. And that's hard. So yeah, that would be my reason number 4 of why I see people leave trail in the first 100 miles is just because life happens. Life happens to the best of us, no matter who you are. Okay, and the last reason of all, surprise, you're not a thru hiker. Or you discovered that you weren't really a thru hiker, whether you aspired to be one, whether you thought you were, wanted to, for whatever reason, you have come to the realization that thru hiking is not for you. Part of this, yeah, I'll throw this in the section too. Part of the reasons why I've seen hikers come to this conclusion is the mental game. When I was coming down San Jacinto, mile 180-ish, 190-ish, I don't know, something like that. San Jacinto was a beast, and it was really hard for me. I found out at the summit that my biological father had passed away. I didn't know him, so it wasn't a huge deal, but still. And then coming down, I went through a pretty raging windstorm, which maybe some of you remember, broke my tent. It was pretty miserable. So at the bottom of San Jacinto, at the water fountain, I stopped to have lunch, and a guy came by, really lightweight pack. Later on, I came to realize that it was Darwin from Darwin on Trail. But anyhow, I didn't know who he was at the time, and we were just sitting there talking. And I was pretty frustrated. I was pretty discouraged. And I was saying things along the line of, I just don't know if I'm cut out for this. And he said something I'll never forget. He said, the fact that you're sitting here now and that you've come this far means that physically you are capable of doing the whole trail. The thing now is that the trail becomes a mental game. And that about sums it up. At that point, physical doesn't really matter. You've already gone, 200 miles, whatever. But then the trail switches from relying on your physical aptitude to relying on your mental aptitude. And it's a mind game. It's the being away from stimulation. It's the isolation. It's the, can you be in your own head for 12, 13 hours a day and be comfortable with everything that comes up? Because when you're out there, you don't have the comforts that you rely on at home to cover up things that may be bothering you. You know, the food, the TV, the alcohol, cigarette, you know, whatever it may be that you use as a coping mechanism when your thoughts get too hard to handle will most likely not be there with you on trail. And so with no box to put these emotions and thoughts into, you're left with nothing but to deal with them. And that's uncomfortable. A lot of people aren't comfortable with the mental game that through hiking becomes after a couple 100 miles. And I would say that, you know, after mile 152 miles, 200 miles, that's the reason that most people get off trail. Because the mental game is hard and it's really uncomfortable. So there you have it. 5 reasons why I've seen people get off trail in the first couple 100 miles. If you're planning a through hike or whatever, I hope this information has been useful to you. I don't know. A lot of this is just taken from my experience, and I may be totally wrong. I might be totally off kilter here. But, you know, at this point, I've hiked a little under 3,000 miles on long trails. So, yeah, take my experience for what it's worth. And, you know, if you did go out and you came home, you probably discovered that either one, situations were beyond your control, or 2, you're a day hiker, or you're a backpacker, or you're a section hiker and you're comfortable with 100 to 200 mile sections, or you're a lasher and you're comfortable with 400 to 500 miles sections. But you have definitely come to the conclusion that you're not a thru hiker. Hey, it's me again. I just wanted to add one more thing. I don't want anyone watching this to think that I'm demeaning or shaming those hikers that choose to leave the trail in any way, shape, or form. In fact, I've seen many hikers get to mile 300, 400 and have sat and chatted with them, and they've been miserable, like horribly miserable, for the past month because they were too stubborn to give up on the idea of a through hike. And they were convinced that sooner or later some marvelous happening would occur and they would all of a sudden be happy being a through hiker again. When really it just resulted in them not having a good experience. And they eventually leave anyways. So I don't know what I'm trying to say. Some people through hike and some people don't. And both ways are totally cool. And if you do leave trail because you realize you're not a through hiker, good for you for doing what's best for you. Good for you for realizing you don't want to be miserable for another month. You went out, you tried it, you decided that wasn't for you. Much like I don't like seafood. So much like me trying sushi and deciding it's not for me, it doesn't make me any more or any less than anybody else. So I just didn't want someone to watch this and feel that I was putting them down in any way for having left trail. In fact, just the opposite is true. I'm proud of you no matter what you do.
There's no other place I'd rather be. Can't you see me out here walking in the rain and hail?